I was sitting in my home office in Scottsdale, Arizona, going through spreadsheets when my doorbell rang 3 times in rapid succession. The aggressive nature of those rings immediately put me on edge. I glanced at my watch, noting it was barely 8 in the morning on a Saturday. Who the hell was pounding on my door at this hour? When I opened it, a woman in her mid-40s stood there with her arms crossed, wearing a pastel pink blazer that looked like it cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. Her blonde hair was styled in that particular way that screamed, "I need to speak to your manager," and her lips were pressed into a thin line of disapproval. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I'm Patricia Whitmore, president of the Desert Vista HOA board," she announced, as if I should be impressed. "And I'm here to inform you that your vehicle has been towed from your driveway." I blinked. "Excuse me." "Your truck," she said, gesturing toward my empty driveway with a manicured hand. "It was parked in violation of our community guidelines, Section 12, subsection B, which clearly states that no commercial vehicles may be parked in resident driveways between the hours of sunset and sunrise." My truck. My 2024 Ford F-350 with Xander's Towing Services emblazoned on the side. The truck I'd parked in my own driveway on my own property that I'd owned for the past 3 years. "You towed my truck from my property," I repeated slowly, making sure I was hearing this correctly. "From your driveway, yes. As per the HOA guidelines that you agreed to when you purchased this home." Patricia pulled out a tablet and began scrolling through something, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the screen. "The fine for this violation is $250, plus you'll need to pay the towing and storage fees to retrieve your vehicle." Something inside me shifted. I'd dealt with difficult people before in my line of work, but this was different. This was my home, my property. And this woman had just admitted to having my truck towed from my own driveway. "Which towing company did you use?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Swift Recovery Towing," she said with a satisfied smile. "They're very efficient. I called them at 6 this morning, and they had your truck removed within 30 minutes. Swift Recovery Towing." The name hit me like a freight train, and I had to fight to keep the smile off my face. Of all the towing companies in Scottsdale, of all the businesses she could have called, Patricia Whitmore had chosen Swift Recovery Towing, the company I'd purchased 8 months ago. "I see," I said carefully. "And where exactly is my truck now?" "At their impound lot on East McDowell Road," Patricia said, consulting her tablet again. "You'll need to bring proof of insurance, registration, and payment for all fees before they'll release it to you. I suggest you handle this promptly, as storage fees accrue daily." "Right. Well, thank you for letting me know, Patricia." She seemed surprised by my calm response. I could tell she'd been expecting an argument, maybe even hoping for one. Instead, I gave her a polite nod and started to close the door. "Wait," she said, holding up a hand. "You'll also need to sign this acknowledgement of the violation." She thrust a piece of paper toward me. "I'm not signing anything," I said flatly, "but I will be retrieving my truck. Have a nice day, Patricia." I closed the door before she could respond and immediately pulled out my phone. My business partner and operations manager, Marcus Chen, answered on the second ring. "Yo, Yates, what's up?" Marcus's voice was cheerful, probably because he was enjoying his Saturday morning coffee in peace. "Marcus, did we get a call this morning for a tow in Desert Vista Estates?" I asked. "Yeah, actually, around 6. Some HOA lady called, said there was a commercial vehicle parked illegally in a residential driveway." "Why? That was my truck, in my driveway." There was a long pause. "You're kidding." "Nope." HOA president just knocked on my door to inform me that my truck was towed and I need to pay to get it back. Marcus burst out laughing. Oh man, this is rich. She called your own company to tow your truck. That's exactly what happened. Who did you send? Tommy was on duty. He should still be at the yard. Want me to call him? No need. I'm heading over there now, but Marcus, I need you to do something for me. Name it. Pull all the documentation on that tow. The call log, who authorized it, what they said, everything. And print out our contract with the city regarding private property tows. You're going to fight this. I'm going to do more than that, I said, grabbing my keys. I'm going to make sure Patricia Whitmore understands exactly what she's done. The drive to my impound lot took 20 minutes. Swift Recovery Towing occupied a 2-acre lot surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. I'd bought the business from old Joe Swift, who'd been ready to retire after 30 years in the industry. The company had a solid reputation, good contracts with the city and several private properties, and a fleet of 5 tow trucks in excellent condition. When I pulled into the lot in my personal car, a silver Lexus that Patricia probably wouldn't have found objectionable, Tommy was sitting in the office with his feet up on the desk. "Boss," he said, straightening up quickly. "Marcus called and told me what happened." "I swear I had no idea it was your place." "Not your fault, Tommy. You were just doing your job." I clapped him on the shoulder. "Where's my truck?" "Back corner, space 14. I felt terrible when Marcus told me. Tommy was a good kid, 23 and trying to save up for college. He worked hard and never complained about early morning calls. Don't worry about it. Actually, this might work out in our favor. Did the woman who called give you any documentation?" "She texted me the address and said it was an HOA violation. I've got the work order right here." He handed me a clipboard with the standard form filled out. At the bottom, Patricia had signed as the authorizing party. Perfect. I walked back to space 14 and found my truck sitting there, perfectly fine. No damage. I took several photos with my phone, documenting everything, then headed back to the office. "Tommy, I need you to process a release for my truck. No fees." "You got it, boss." While he filled out the paperwork, I sat down at the computer and pulled up our records. The call had come in at 6:03 in the morning. Patricia had identified herself as the HOA president and stated that a commercial vehicle was parked in violation of community rules. She'd provided the address and requested immediate removal. What Patricia didn't know, what she clearly hadn't bothered to research, was that in Arizona, HOAs have very limited authority when it comes to private property. They can fine homeowners for violations, sure, but actually removing property from someone's private driveway without their consent, that was a whole different ball game. I pulled up the Arizona revised statutes on my phone and found exactly what I needed. Title 33, Chapter 16, dealing with planned communities. Then I opened up the criminal code. What Patricia had done wasn't just a civil violation. It was potentially theft. Marcus arrived about 30 minutes later, carrying a thick folder of documents. "Got everything you asked for," he said, dropping the folder on the desk. "Also pulled our contracts and the legal guidelines for private property tows. Yates, I think this lady really screwed up." "She did." "Question is, how do I want to handle this?" "You could sue," Marcus suggested. "Probably win, too." "I could, or I could have her arrested." Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "Seriously, she had property removed from my private driveway without my consent. That's theft. At minimum, it's unlawful towing, which is a misdemeanor in Arizona." I leaned back in my chair, thinking through my options. But I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in making sure she doesn't do this to anyone else. So what's the play? I'm going to educate her. And if she doesn't want to learn, then we'll escalate. I drove my truck back home, making sure to park it in exactly the same spot where it had been that morning. Then I went inside and started making calls. My first call was to my lawyer, Rebecca Torres. She specialized in property law and had helped me navigate the legal complexities of buying the towing company. "Yates, good to hear from you," Rebecca said. "What can I do for you?" I explained the situation, and she listened without interrupting. When I finished, she let out a low whistle. "That's incredibly stupid of the HOA president. She had no legal authority to do that." That's what I thought. What are my options? Well, you could file a civil suit for unlawful towing and any damages. You could also file a police report for theft, though that might be harder to make stick. But honestly, your best bet is to send her a letter explaining exactly why what she did was illegal and demanding that she cease and desist from any further violations. If she persists, then you have grounds for a harassment claim on top of everything else. What about the HOA fine she mentioned? Ignore it. Even if your HOA has rules about commercial vehicles, and even if you violated those rules, which is debatable since you live there and use the truck for your business, they can't just tow your property. They have to follow due process. Warnings, hearings, that sort of thing. And even then, they can fine you, but they can't remove your property. Can you draft that letter for me? Absolutely. I'll have it to you by Monday morning. My second call was to the Scottsdale Police Department non-emergency line. I explained what had happened and asked if I could file a report. The officer I spoke with took down all the information and said he'd send someone out to take a formal statement. 2 hours later, Officer James Rodriguez was sitting in my living room, taking notes. "So let me make sure I have this straight," he said. "The HOA president called a towing company to remove your truck from your private driveway without your knowledge or consent, correct? And you own the towing company she called, also correct?" Officer Rodriguez shook his head. "That's a new one. I've been doing this for 12 years and I've never heard anything quite like it. Is it illegal, what she did?" "That's going to be up to the county attorney to decide, but in my opinion, yes. At minimum, it's unlawful removal of property. Could potentially be charged as theft, depending on how the DA's office wants to handle it." He finished writing and looked up. "I'm going to file this report and forward it to the Property Crimes Division. Someone will likely follow up with you in the next few days. What about the HOA president? We'll probably want to interview her as well. I'd suggest you avoid any direct contact with her until this is resolved." That was going to be difficult, considering we lived in the same neighborhood, but I agreed. Officer Rodriguez left, and I spent the rest of Saturday compiling evidence. I printed out the work order from the tow, screenshots of the call log, copies of the Arizona statutes that Patricia had violated, and the Desert Vista HOA's own bylaws, which I dug out of the filing cabinet in my office. Sunday morning, I woke up to find a letter taped to my front door. It was from Patricia, informing me that I had been fined $250 for the commercial vehicle violation, plus an additional $100 for failure to comply with an HOA directive. The letter stated that I had 10 days to pay or face additional penalties, including potential legal action. I took a photo of the letter, added it to my evidence file, and texted it to Rebecca. She responded within minutes. "This just keeps getting better. She's digging herself deeper." Monday morning, Rebecca's letter arrived via email. It was 3 pages long and exhaustively detailed every law that Patricia had broken, every statute she'd violated, and every potential consequence she faced. It demanded that she immediately rescind all fines, issue a formal written apology, and cease any further harassment. It also informed her that I was prepared to pursue both civil and criminal action if she failed to comply. I printed it out, signed it, and had it delivered to Patricia's house via certified mail, return receipt requested. Then I waited. The response came faster than I expected. Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Yates Zander?" a man's voice asked. "Speaking." "This is Donald Kemp, attorney for the Desert Vista HOA board. I understand there's been some conflict between you and Miss Whitmore." Conflict is one word for it. Theft is another. Now, Mr. Zander, let's not be hasty with accusations. I've reviewed the situation, and while I acknowledge there may have been some procedural irregularities, I don't think criminal charges are warranted. Your client had my property removed from my private driveway without my consent, and then tried to charge me to get it back. That's not a procedural irregularity, Mr. Kemp. That's theft. Miss Whitmore was acting in her capacity as HOA president, enforcing the community guidelines. The community guidelines don't give her the right to tow vehicles from private property. That's established in Arizona law, which I'm sure you're familiar with. There was a pause. "What exactly do you want, Mr. Zander?" "I want the fines rescinded. I want a written apology, and I want assurance that this won't happen again to me or anyone else in this community. And if the board agrees to these terms, then I won't pursue criminal charges or a civil suit. I'll need to discuss this with my clients. Can I call you back tomorrow?" "You have until Friday. After that, I'm moving forward with legal action." I hung up and immediately called Rebecca to fill her in. "He's scared," she said. "That's good. Means they know they screwed up. Think they'll agree to my terms, if they have any sense, yes. But HOA boards aren't exactly known for their sense." Wednesday passed without word. I went about my normal business, managing the towing company, handling customer calls, checking in with my crew. Tommy kept apologizing every time he saw me, and I kept telling him it wasn't his fault. Marcus found the whole situation hilarious. "You should frame that work order," he said. "It's not every day someone pays you to steal your own truck." "Technically, the HOA hasn't paid us yet," I pointed out. "Oh man, I didn't even think of that. Are you going to bill them?" "Absolutely. Standard rates, too. They called for a service, they're paying for it." Thursday afternoon, I was in the yard office when I got another call from Donald Kemp. "Mr. Zander, I've spoken with the HOA board. They're prepared to rescind the fines and issue a written apology. And the assurance that this won't happen again. The board has agreed to review and amend the enforcement procedures for community violations. That's not what I asked for, Mr. Kemp. It's the best I can offer. The board feels that they need to maintain their authority to enforce community standards. They can enforce standards all they want. They just can't tow people's property without due process. I want it in writing that they will not remove any homeowner's property from their private driveway without first going through the proper legal channels, which includes notices, hearings, and if necessary, a court order." Another pause. "I'll have to get back to you." "You do that. And Mr. Kemp, don't forget about the bill." "What bill?" "For the towing service. Your client called my company, my driver responded, and we performed a service. That service costs money. I'll be sending an invoice to the HOA for $350, which is our standard rate for an early morning private property tow." "You can't be serious." "Completely serious. You want me to drop the legal action, pay the bill. Consider it a lesson in reading the fine print. My company has a strict policy. If you call for a tow, you pay for the tow, regardless of whether you later decide you want the vehicle returned." I could practically hear Donald Kemp grinding his teeth. "I'll discuss it with the board." Friday morning came with no response. I called Rebecca. "They're stalling," she said. probably hoping you'll just let it go. Should I file the lawsuit? Let's give them until end of business today. If you don't hear back by 5, I'll have the papers filed first thing Monday morning. At 4:45, my phone rang. Donald Kemp again. The board has agreed to your terms, all of them, including the invoice. Excellent. I'll need everything in writing. I'll have the documents to you by end of day. There's one additional condition. What's that? Miss Whitmore has resigned as HOA president. The board felt it was best, given the circumstances. Her replacement, Michael Holloway, would like to meet with you to ensure there are no further issues. I had to admit, I was surprised. I'd expected Patricia to dig in her heels, not resign. I'm willing to meet with Mr. Holloway. Excellent. I'll have him reach out to you next week. True to his word, the documents arrived by email at 5:30. A letter from the HOA board rescinding all fines. A formal apology signed by 4 of the 5 board members. Patricia's name was notably absent. And a revised enforcement policy that explicitly stated the HOA would not remove property from private driveways without court approval. There was also a check for $350 made out to Swift Recovery Towing. I deposited the check Monday morning and sent a thank you note to the HOA board. Tuesday evening, Michael Holloway called. He sounded younger than I expected, maybe early 30s. Mr. Zander, I want to apologize on behalf of the entire board for what happened. Patricia acted without authorization, and what she did was completely unacceptable. I appreciate that, Mr. Holloway. Please call me Mike. I'm hoping we can start fresh. I've lived in Desert Vista for 5 years, and I've always thought it was a great community. But the previous board was too focused on rules and not enough on building relationships with homeowners. That's a good approach. I'd also like to address the commercial vehicle policy. After reviewing the bylaws, I think it's outdated. A lot of people in this neighborhood work from home or run their own businesses. As long as vehicles aren't causing problems, blocking streets, or creating safety hazards, I don't see why we should be policing what people park in their own driveways. I'd agree with that. Would you be willing to serve on a committee to review and update the HOA policies? We're looking for homeowners who can provide practical input. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say no, to avoid any further involvement with HOA politics. But another part recognized that this was an opportunity to actually make a difference, to prevent what happened to me from happening to someone else. Sure, I'll do it. Great. Our first meeting is next Thursday at 7. I'll send you the details. Over the next few months, I attended half a dozen committee meetings. Mike had assembled a diverse group of homeowners, a retired teacher, a small business owner, a work-from-home consultant, and a young couple who'd recently moved in. Together, we went through the HOA bylaws section by section, modernizing outdated rules and removing policies that were overly restrictive. The commercial vehicle policy was eliminated entirely. Instead, we adopted a common-sense approach. Vehicles had to be legally registered and maintained, couldn't block sidewalks or streets, and couldn't be used for on-site commercial activities that would disturb neighbors. My tow truck parked in my driveway was fine. Someone running an auto repair shop out of their garage would not be. We also implemented a new enforcement procedure. Before any fine could be issued, homeowners would receive a written warning and an opportunity to address the issue. If the problem persisted, there would be a hearing before the board where the homeowner could present their case. Only after that process could fines be levied, and even then, homeowners had the right to appeal. It wasn't perfect, but it was a hell of a lot better than Patricia's reign of terror. I saw Patricia around the neighborhood occasionally. She never spoke to me, just turned and walked the other way whenever our paths crossed. I heard through the grapevine that she'd tried to rally support to overturn the new policies, but found little sympathy. Apparently, I wasn't the only homeowner she'd targeted with overzealous enforcement. Once people realized they didn't have to put up with her arbitrary rules, they were happy to see her gone. One Saturday morning in late spring, about 6 months after the towing incident, I was washing my truck in the driveway when a car pulled up. A woman in her 60s got out, smiling. "You must be Yates," she said. "I'm Helen Drummond. I live 3 streets over." "Nice to meet you, Helen. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to thank you. Patricia tried to fine me for having a rainbow flag in my front window, said it violated some community standards policy. But when I went to the board meeting to fight it, Mike told me that policy had been eliminated thanks to the work your committee did. I'm glad we could help." "You did more than help. You made this neighborhood feel like home again." Patricia had a lot of us scared to do anything that might draw her attention. Now we can actually enjoy living here. After Helen left, I stood in my driveway, looking at my truck with Xander's Towing Services emblazoned on the side, and I had to laugh. Patricia had tried to make my life difficult, to flex her authority and put me in my place. Instead, she'd lost her position, united the neighborhood against her, and paid me $350 for the privilege. The committee work continued through the summer. We tackled landscaping requirements next, which had been a source of constant complaints. The old rules required specific types of grass, approved plant lists, and mandatory monthly lawn service. We changed it to focus on water conservation and desert-appropriate landscaping, which made a lot more sense for Scottsdale's climate. In August, I got a call from Detective Sarah Chen with the Scottsdale Police Department. "Mr. Xander, I'm following up on the report you filed back in March regarding the unlawful towing of your vehicle. Has something happened? We've completed our investigation. The county attorney's office has decided not to pursue criminal charges against Miss Whitmore." I felt a flash of disappointment, but it wasn't entirely unexpected. "Can I ask why?" "A few reasons. 1. You got your property back quickly and without having to pay. 2. There's no evidence of intent to permanently deprive you of your property, which is required for theft charges. And 3. You reached a civil resolution with the HOA. The DA felt that pursuing criminal charges wouldn't serve the public interest." "I understand. However, I want you to know that we did interview Miss Whitmore, and we made it very clear that what she did was illegal. She won't be doing it again." "I appreciate that, Detective. Between you and me, Mr. Xander, I've dealt with a lot of HOA disputes over the years. Most of them are petty nonsense, people arguing over fence heights and mailbox colors. But every once in a while you get someone who thinks being on an HOA board gives them unlimited power. I'm glad you stood up for yourself." After we hung up, I felt oddly satisfied. No, Patricia wasn't going to face criminal charges, but she'd faced consequences. She'd lost her position, her reputation, and her authority. And more importantly, the system had been changed to prevent her or anyone like her from abusing their power again. The committee finished its work in September. We presented our revised bylaws to the full HOA membership at a town hall meeting. Out of curiosity, I scanned the crowd for Patricia, but she wasn't there. The vote was almost unanimous in favor of the new policies. Only 2 people voted against them, and neither could articulate a reason beyond the old rules worked fine. After the meeting, Mike pulled me aside. "I can't thank you enough for your work on this. You turned a nightmare situation into something positive for the whole community. I just didn't want anyone else to go through what I did." "Well, you accomplished that and more. Hey, the board has an opening. Would you consider joining?" I thought about it for about 3 seconds. Thanks, but no thanks. I'll help out on committees if you need me, but I don't want to be on the board itself. Fair enough. The offer's open if you change your mind. Life settled into a comfortable routine after that. The towing business continued to grow. We added a sixth truck to the fleet and hired 2 more drivers. Marcus and I started talking about expanding to Phoenix proper, maybe opening a second location. One October morning, almost 7 months after the original incident, I was at the main yard office doing paperwork when Marcus came in looking excited. "You're never going to believe who just called asking for a tow." "Who?" "Patricia Whitmore." I looked up. "You're joking." "Nope. Her car broke down on the 101 and she called us." Dispatcher didn't recognize the name, but I was sitting right there when the call came in. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing yet. Wanted to check with you first. We're not obligated to take the call. Tommy's available, but so is Rick, and it's technically Rick's turn in the rotation." I leaned back in my chair. The petty part of me wanted to refuse the job, to leave her stranded on the side of the highway. But that wasn't who I was, and it wasn't how I ran my business. "Send Tommy. Tell him to treat her like any other customer. Professional, courteous, by the book." "You sure?" "Positive. She needs help, we provide it, that's what we do." Marcus nodded and headed back to dispatch. About an hour later, Tommy called in. "Boss, job's done. Towed her to that Honda dealership on Scottsdale Road like she requested." "Any problems?" "Nah, she was pretty quiet actually. Didn't even say much beyond where she wanted to go. I don't think she recognized me from last time." "Good work, Tommy." The invoice for that tow was processed just like any other. Patricia paid it without complaint. A few days later, I was checking the mail when I found an envelope addressed to me in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Mr. Zander, I owe you an apology. What I did in March was wrong, and I've spent the past 7 months thinking about why I acted the way I did. I was so focused on rules and regulations that I forgot we're all just neighbors trying to live our lives. I heard about the new policies the committee implemented, and I think they're much better than what we had before. I also wanted to thank you for sending someone to help me when my car broke down. You had every right to refuse, and I appreciate that you didn't. I hope you can forgive me. Patricia Whitmore." I read the letter twice, then filed it away with all the other documents from the incident. I didn't frame it, didn't show it to anyone, just acknowledged it and moved on. Forgiveness is a complicated thing. Patricia had made a mistake, a pretty significant one, and she'd faced consequences for it. She'd lost her position and her reputation. Now she was trying to make amends. That took courage, and I respected it. Did I fully forgive her? Maybe not entirely. But I could accept her apology and move forward. The holidays came and went. Desert Vista Estates looked beautiful, with decorations that ranged from tasteful to gloriously tacky. Under the old rules, Patricia would have been sending violation notices left and right. Under the new policies, as long as decorations weren't creating safety hazards or blocking sightlines, people could decorate however they wanted. The neighborhood felt different now. Friendlier. People waved when they drove by, stopped to chat when they saw each other at the mailbox. The fear of arbitrary enforcement was gone, replaced by a sense of community. In January, almost a year after the incident, the HOA held its annual meeting and elections. Mike ran for president again and won easily. The rest of the board remained mostly the same, with one new member, a retired engineer who'd been active on several committees. During the meeting, Mike gave a state of the community address. He talked about the improved financial position, the successful policy updates, and the increased participation in community events. Then he said something that surprised me. I want to take a moment to thank someone who isn't on the board but who has had a tremendous impact on our community. Last March, Yates Zander experienced a serious overreach of HOA authority. Instead of just fighting for himself, he agreed to work with us to fix the system. The policies we have now, the processes that protect all of us, exist in large part because Yates was willing to turn a negative experience into positive change. Thank you, Yates. The room erupted in applause. I felt my face getting red, uncomfortable with the attention but also genuinely touched. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to thank me personally. Helen Drummond gave me a hug. The young couple who'd served on the committee with me invited me to a barbecue the following weekend. Even people I'd never spoken to before went out of their way to introduce themselves. As I was leaving, a man in his 70s approached me. "Yates Zander, I'm Bill Peterson. I live on Sagaro Drive." "Nice to meet you, Bill. I wanted to tell you something. Back in April, Patricia tried to fine me because my lawn had some patches of dead grass. Said it was an eyesore and violated maintenance standards. I was about to just pay the fine and resod the whole yard, which would have cost me thousands of dollars I don't really have on my fixed income. Then the new policies went through, and suddenly it wasn't a violation anymore. You saved me from a lot of financial stress. I'm glad the new policies helped. It's more than that. You stood up to a bully. A lot of us were afraid to, worried about making waves or getting targeted for more violations. You showed us that we didn't have to accept it." We talked for a few more minutes, then Bill headed home. I sat in my car for a while, thinking about everything that had happened over the past year. One impulsive decision by an overzealous HOA president had set off a chain of events that changed an entire community. Patricia had thought she was enforcing rules and maintaining standards. In reality, she'd been wielding power arbitrarily, making people afraid in their own homes. And the universe, in its infinite sense of irony, had arranged for her to call the one towing company in Scottsdale that could teach her a lesson. I drove home that night thinking about how strange life can be. How one moment can cascade into dozens of others, each one branching off in unexpected directions. If Patricia had called any other towing company, I probably would have paid the fine and moved on, maybe grumbling to my neighbors but not taking action. If I hadn't happened to own the company she called, I wouldn't have had the leverage to push for real change. But all those factors aligned, and something good came from it. The business continued to thrive. By spring, we'd opened that second location in Phoenix, and Marcus was managing the day-to-day operations of both yards. I was able to step back a bit, focus on the strategic side of things, spend more time on the parts of the business I actually enjoyed. I also started dating someone, Penelope Kirkland, a veterinarian I'd met at a neighborhood event in March. She had a great sense of humor about the whole towing situation. "So let me get this straight," she'd said on our first date. "The HOA lady called your company to tow your truck, then tried to make you pay to get it back. That's pretty much it. And you billed the HOA for the tow?" "Yep." She'd laughed so hard she almost spit out her wine. "That's the best revenge I've ever heard." "It wasn't really about revenge," I'd said. "It was about principle." "Oh, it can be both. Trust me. Anyone who's ever dealt with a difficult HOA is living vicariously through your story right now." She was right. When the local news got wind of what had happened, they wanted to do a story. I declined, not wanting to embarrass Patricia further or make the whole thing into a circus. But word still spread. I got emails from people all over Arizona, some from other states, sharing their own HOA horror stories and thanking me for standing up to the system. I tried to respond to as many as I could, always with the same message. Know your rights. document everything, and don't be afraid to push back when authority is abused. In May, I got an invitation to speak at a homeowners' rights conference in Phoenix. The organizer had heard about my situation and thought it would make a good case study for how to effectively challenge HOA overreach. I agreed and spent a Saturday afternoon in a hotel conference room talking to about 200 people about bylaws, enforcement procedures, and the importance of community engagement. It was surreal, standing at a podium discussing something that had started as just a personal frustration. But people were genuinely interested. They asked questions, took notes, shared their own stories. A lawyer who specialized in HOA law came up afterward and gave me her card, said I'd done a better job explaining property rights than most attorneys she knew. Through all of this, I kept running my business, kept living in Desert Vista Estates, kept parking my tow truck in my driveway. No one ever complained about it again. I did occasionally see Patricia around the neighborhood. She'd moved from outright avoidance to polite nods when we passed each other. We never had a real conversation, and that was fine. Some bridges, once burned, don't need to be rebuilt. We could coexist peacefully without being friends. The second anniversary of the towing incident came and went without fanfare. I was at the yard office when Marcus brought it up. "You realize it's been exactly 2 years since Patricia had your truck towed." I looked at the calendar. March 15th. Didn't even realize. "You should celebrate. This is the anniversary of the day you became a legend." "I'm not a legend, Marcus. I just stood up for myself." "Same thing in HOA land." He grinned. "Come on, let me buy you lunch. We'll toast to overreaching HOA presidents and the towing companies they unknowingly call." We went to a Mexican place near the yard, sat on the patio, and did exactly that. It felt good to laugh about it, to recognize how absurd the whole situation had been while also acknowledging the real changes that had come from it. Life in Desert Vista Estates continued to improve. Mike served 2 more terms as HOA president before stepping down, and his successor, Carol Martinez, continued the community-focused approach he'd started. The neighborhood became known in Scottsdale as one of the more progressive, resident-friendly HOAs, which helped property values and made it easier to attract new buyers. My towing company expanded again. We added locations in Tempe and Mesa, rebranded as Xander's Recovery Services, and became one of the largest independent towing operations in the Phoenix metro area. We were known for fair pricing, professional service, and an ironclad policy. We didn't tow from private property without verifying authorization and property rights. That last part came directly from my experience with Patricia. I never wanted one of my drivers to unknowingly participate in an illegal tow, and I wanted anyone calling for a private property removal to understand their legal obligations. Penelope and I got engaged in June of that 3rd year, married in October. We bought a bigger house in Desert Vista Estates, one with a proper 3-car garage where I could park my truck without it being visible from the street. Not because I was worried about complaints, but because we needed the space. At the wedding reception, Mike gave a toast that included the line, "Here's to Yates, who turned an HOA violation into a business opportunity and a community revolution." Everyone laughed, including me. Patricia didn't attend the wedding, but she did send a card with a surprisingly generous check. The note inside said simply, "Congratulations, wishing you both all the best." I showed it to Penelope and she raised an eyebrow. "That's unexpected. People can change," I said. "They can. Doesn't mean you have to forget what happened." "I haven't forgotten, but I've moved on," and I had. The whole incident had become a story I told at parties, a weird quirk in my personal history. It had shaped how I ran my business, how I thought about community governance, and how I approached conflict. But it didn't define me. Years passed. The towing company continued to grow. Penelope and I had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. We stayed in Desert Vista Estates, raised our family there, became part of the fabric of the community. I occasionally served on HOA committees when they needed someone with institutional knowledge or a business perspective. I never joined the board itself, keeping that boundary I'd set years earlier. Patricia eventually moved away. I heard she'd relocated to Tucson, wanted a fresh start somewhere without the history and baggage. I wished her well. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption, and from what I could tell, she'd learned from her mistakes. The tow truck that started it all, my 2024 F350, eventually got retired from active service. Too many miles, too much wear and tear. I kept it though, parked in my garage, a reminder of where everything started. Sometimes I'd sit in the driver's seat, looking at the Xander's Towing Services logo on the door, and think about that Saturday morning when Patricia knocked on my door to inform me my truck had been towed. She'd meant to put me in my place, to demonstrate her authority and make me comply with her interpretation of the rules. Instead, she'd set in motion a series of events that cost her her position, reformed an entire HOA's governance structure, and inadvertently helped my business grow. The universe has a funny way of balancing the scales. I think about the people who thanked me over the years, the neighbors who said I'd made their lives better by standing up to an unjust system. I think about Bill Peterson and his lawn, Helen Drummond and her flag, all the small tyrannies that were ended because one HOA president made one very stupid decision. Would I change anything if I could go back? Maybe I'd have hidden my smile a little better when Patricia told me which towing company she'd called. But beyond that, no. Everything that happened for a reason. The lesson isn't that all HOAs are bad or that all board members are power-hungry tyrants. Most aren't. Most are just regular people trying to maintain property values and keep their neighborhoods nice. The lesson is about checks and balances, about the importance of questioning authority when it overreaches, about standing up for yourself even when it's uncomfortable or scary. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the lesson is about karma working in mysterious and hilarious ways. I still run Xander's recovery services, though I'm less involved in day-to-day operations now. Marcus is the CEO, and he's better at it than I ever was. We have 12 locations across Arizona, over 50 employees, and contracts with most of the major municipalities in the state. We also have a training program for new drivers that includes a whole section on property rights, legal towing procedures, and how to verify authorization. I teach that class personally, and I always start with the same story. Let me tell you about the time an HOA president called our company to tow a truck from someone's private driveway. I begin. She had no idea that the truck belonged to the guy who owned the company she called. The new drivers always laugh. Then I explain why it's not actually funny, why what Patricia did was illegal, and why they need to understand the law before they hook up any vehicle. It's become my mission in a way. Making sure that what happened to me, both the violation and the ridiculous circumstances around it, serves a purpose beyond just being a good story. Education, prevention, protection. Those are the 3 pillars I built the company on. And they came directly from that March morning when I opened my door to find Patricia Whitmore standing there with her tablet and her attitude, and her complete ignorance of the law. She thought she was teaching me a lesson. In the end, I taught her one instead. And every time one of my trucks rolls out of the yard, operating legally and ethically, treating people with respect and dignity, that lesson continues. That's the real story. not just about revenge or karma or poetic justice, though those elements are certainly there. It's about taking a negative experience and transforming it into something positive. It's about using your leverage, whatever form that takes, to make systemic changes that help everyone. It's about refusing to be a victim, refusing to accept injustice, and refusing to let small-minded people with temporary authority dictate how you live your life. Patricia Whitmore tried to tow my truck and assert her dominance. Instead, she towed me straight into action, into advocacy, into becoming someone who could actually make a difference. For that, in a weird way, I'm almost grateful. Almost. I still billed her the $350.